Xiang from Home and Decor magazine. We're currently at HOMEDEC 2017. As you can see, we have a special guest with us. Tony, would you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Okay, sure. Tony Heneberry. I've lived in Malaysia about 20 years, and I design mostly residential projects here. Here in around Malaysia and a couple of other places. I guess my style is known a little bit more for kind of a New York meets the tropics kind of a look. So, and I think you guys have covered me in a few times in the past for some of my projects.
What attracts you to the more tropical aesthetic?
I think what interests me about designing for Malaysia is that for a few decades I noticed that Malaysian urban architecture adopted a style that wasn't really suited for the tropics. So Malaysian design style tended towards enclosed, air-conditioned spaces. And I guess as an outsider coming in, I felt that there was an opportunity to go back to a more traditional style. So when I first came here, I used to spend a lot of time in Terengganu, and I quite liked the kampung architecture, open spaces, integrated family spaces, a lot of cross-flow ventilation. So what I've attempted to do is to reintroduce that style of living back into an urban setting. In other words, embrace the tropical climate. And so my spaces don't rely so much on air conditioning, and don't fear the mosquito. There aren't that many of them around, or as many as you think. And don't close yourself into little cold bubbles, because we're in the tropics. You just need to embrace the tropics and the environment.
Were there any difficulties or challenges when you wanted this tropical idea?
Yeah, initially the difficulty is that because you've had a few decades of construction and building and designing in a style that's really not a Malaysian style.
Yeah.
A lot of the traditional artisan skills are lost actually. So woodworking skills, I mean, what you call carpentry now is cabinet work. What you call brickwork is very basic brickwork. You know, steel. A lot of those steelwork, carpentry, brickwork, cement work skills, terrazzo skills have all faded away. So finding people who have the skills is very difficult. And then when you find people who want to learn, then you got to allow the time to and allow the space for some mistakes while people develop those skills, because it takes a bit of time to reintroduce those kind of artisan skills.
Can you tell us more about your current projects, like what you're working on?
Oh gosh, okay. I have, over the last 5 or 6 years, I started this business here about just over 6 years ago, and initially I got very well known for my link house conversions, which are pretty extreme. And so I currently have about 3 or 4 link house and end link conversions, which are all typical of my style. They're pretty extreme. Do a lot of inversion, a lot of cross-flow internal courtyard spaces. I also have several new builds, which are kind of hillside villas. So my project size is varying from a link house conversion of say 2,000, converting up to maybe 3,000 square foot, to villas which are around 5,000 to about 8,000 square foot built up areas. But the design philosophy is fairly consistent across all of them, which is good integration of the outdoor space, good integration between the landscape and the internal spaces, so that the spaces feel bigger, more ventilated, more. I guess all my properties, whether they're small or big, have a resort feel to them, and that's what I challenge myself to do. Is even in very small spaces, is to give them a resort feel.
Tell us more on how you make them look bigger.
Yeah, you have to play a little bit with your view lines. So, for example, I don't know if this is so meaningful, but let's say you have a small bedroom. Let's say it's a 4 meter by 4 meter bedroom. However, depending on the orientation or the aspect, or you've got to find your aspect. So if I can add a balcony space and layer it with what's happening on the outside layer, or the perimeter, which might be the car park or the garden, you can create your vision line, or you can expand your vision line from say 4 meters up to maybe 8 or 10 meters. So by doing that, you make the room feel much larger. It's just a visual trick. but the impression you have when you're inside that space is you're not sitting in a 3.5 or a 4 meter box, but you're sitting in almost in an outdoor garden space of maybe 10 or 12 or 13 meters. So using skylights, using your vision lines, using ventilation lines so that the air stays cool enough that you can leave your windows open or your glass doors open. All of those are simple techniques for layering the space.
From your experience, what is the most difficult part in decorating or finishing?
The most difficult part when you're doing it for somebody else is getting alignment, making sure that you're thinking the same way. And where I have a particular impression of what I would do if it was my space, being open to what the owner or the client wants, but guiding them, even though what they want might be different than what I want or what I would do.
Yeah.
It's their property, it's their home, so you still need to guide them to avoid mistakes without imposing your own preference on it. So you still need to get them where they need the best place they want to be, not necessarily the best place I want to be. So that can be, sometimes it's very easy because some owners or clients are very open to just going with the flow of what I do. But some, as the project progresses, you can see that some people then kind of find out what they want, and then you have to find that way of guiding rather than imposing. So that can be challenging.
Are there common mistakes? Are there certain common mistakes you see among homeowners?
Yeah, so with people who are doing a project for the first time, or are who don't have a lot of experience, let's say, there's a few typical mistakes. One is they get very excited by really nice ideas they see from hotels or traveling or whatever, and they overload the house with too many ideas. And I can see how it happens, because you go to one hotel and you go, oh, that's beautiful, and they want to recreate that experience and that mood.
Yes.
But you have to designing is as much about what you don't do as about what you do. So you gotta, people who've done this a few times know that you can't put all your clever ideas into one place. And with people like that, my most common expression is, wait till your next house. So when the next house is a bit different or a bit bigger or is a different space, then those 4 fantastic ideas will work better in there. But you've got to be a bit restrained, and guiding people to be a little bit restrained with the lovely and clever ideas and stay consistent to a theme, and not overpower yourself with too many colors, too many clever ideas, too many shapes, and not trying to do too much.
But what should we start with before we come up with all these?
Okay, so you don't start with a single clever idea. It's not about a piece of furniture or an angle or a corner. It's really about a mood that you're trying to create. So when you get the feel of a space, and you can make really ugly spaces or ugly aspects work very well. But once you know what you're trying to achieve, it's more like a philosophy. Once you know what you're trying to achieve from a mood point of view, then that becomes your kind of your strategic guide, and you test your ideas. Am I still being consistent to that objective? And it isn't if you start with I want to design a house that has a particular brick finish or a particular feature wall, you could end up going really way off track of where you should be or could be, because you're too limited by that one piece. Or you think, I've got a lovely piece of furniture, and then you design a house around a piece of furniture. Don't do that. The furniture and the colors, even if you think your house is going to be red or blue or pink or whatever, you kind of park that in preference to setting what your goal is in terms of the mood. Is it to be a relaxing space? Is it to be a resort? Is it to be am I going to focus on my kids' activities or my family activities, and what mood do I want for that? And then you're guided to stick to that need of the mood. Then the colours and the furniture and the shapes can be modified to that goal. For the projects I do, there's 3 things that are very important for me. One would be to maximise the amount of light into the space, and in doing so to maximise the sense of space. So even when you've got a very small, let's say you've got a small bedroom, very small space out of it, so long as you can do something that creates like a courtyard feel, you can make that space feel very luxurious and intimate and exciting. So using, being brave about how you use window lines and vision lines is really important. Secondly, maximizing wherever possible your cross flow and your ventilation, whether it's sideways or up or down or whatever. Just create an opportunity that you can open things out so that you have fresh air and you're not relying on air conditioning all the time. Another thing that I tend to do when I'm designing for owners, other owners rather than houses that I buy to design for myself, is I use a lot of bare finishes, so I use brick and wood, but I don't use them as a dominant feature. I tend to use them as neutral textures so that the owner can imprint their own personality on top of that. So it becomes, I feel that if you are too ornate or too dominant with the bare finishes, you restrict the owner's personality coming through.
So you have to minimize the use of.
Not minimize them. It's not minimize. I can use quite a lot of it, but use it in a way that's quite soft. That's quite that's a relatively a relaxing texture as opposed to an imposing texture, because there is a design style where the work is incredibly sophisticated and very clever, but it defines the designer rather than the owner. And I think my role is to design a space where the owner's personality eventually is what comes through.
So how do you define what a traditional Malaysian house is like in terms of design?
Oh, that's easy because they still exist here. You can still go to Penang or Malacca or Terengganu and you can see the traditional wood houses. You take a lot of pressure off the space, and that meant that you could be very indulgent in how the space is created. And as a result, it's not overloaded with storage, but there's still a lot of storage. But the spaces for a link house, the spaces are magnificent. They really are. When you walk into it, you just go, wow, this just feels so grand because the spaces are very relaxed. In terms of the amount of pressure on the space, it's very relaxed. So those ones I really like. And when you can do that, that's fantastic because you can take what looks like a tiny house on the outside, and when you walk into them, they look spectacular. I'm doing one at the moment, which is for a furnishing solution for a project that's high quality, cost effective, and I can take a lot of time pressure off by engaging their capabilities to support me. Then actually they're really good. I see a lot of partnership opportunities with them, but also I see an opportunity for me to, instead of just doing one-off, design something that they can then take over the manufacturing and then turn it into a catalogue item from their point of view. But to do a lot of retail, I'm not equipped for that. I tend to do one-offs or clusters that are, because I need it for my project.
So is there a specific product that you're looking for you to design?
I think what people sometimes do is they'll see something, they go through my portfolio or they go through online, they say, well, I really like that, whatever that is. It might be something I did with railway sleepers or a concrete table, and say, can you do something like that? And I say, okay, I'll design for you. And then I custom design on that style for their space. So that's quite common.
Thinking about Rabbit, is it a local?
Yeah, local. They're quite new, but they're growing very fast. And after I tried them on a couple of projects, and then I got to know the owner, I just thought, okay, I can see how these guys can, for somebody like me as a relatively small business, they can take a lot of pressure off me if we can collaborate effectively.
Are they actually looking for a specific piece from you?
Not particularly, but they're very open because they want to be distinctive in the marketplace too. And my stuff is distinctive, so they want to be mainstream as well as having within the portfolio distinctive or standout pieces, as well as designing their own. I'm happy to take stuff that I design and see it appear in their catalog. Actually, I haven't talked so much to them about that. They might be hearing this for the first time. I don't know.
That's awesome. Last question: do you have any advice for upcoming designers?
You mean young designers or? Okay. So you got to travel. You got to get out in the world and see stuff. If you're designing spec, in other words, designing from your own creativity, you really have to be very exposed. Designing spec is not easy as when you're starting out, because you're taking a lot. You haven't established yourself, and you don't have the relationships yet, so you have to risk. And if you're prepared to take that risk, that's fine. if you're designing, which isn't particularly a Regency style, it's more of the old Canton style, and so they were very focused on central family space. Everything worked off that central family space. For whatever reason, during the 70s and 80s, I think in the 60s through to the 70s, actually there was a style that was still sympathetic to that, even though you changed to brick and concrete. But in the 80s and 90s, all disappeared. And there was a kind of inverted commas, a modern style that came in that fragmented or fractured the space. So everybody had a little cubicle, which meant that families didn't interact anymore. Children went off to their cubicle, and in a modern context that means they went off into the cubicle and sat on a screen. So the traditional style of community living, and even the way the kampong houses were arranged, they were still arranged around a central outdoor space that was effectively a shared space, so that community within a community, where the community, whether it's a family or the family is part of a cluster of families, where the interaction was maximised, I think is really valuable. And get the TV out of the main room. Create a TV room that's a space you go to for TV, not the default for the family space. So people talk, listen to music, and even if you're reading a paper but you're still part of your shared space, I think that's quite valuable from a social point of view.
Projects both internationally?
A little bit internationally, but not so much these days.
More focused on Malaysia?
Mostly around Malaysia.
So this year, is there any projects that you like to work on?
Yeah, these days I'm quite a small business. Up to 6 or 7 years ago, it was a different and a much larger business. So I don't do a huge number of projects. I do typically about 9 or 10 a year, and a mixture from small to kind of, like I say, about 6,000-7,000 square feet. But this year, or early next year, I'm hoping to do a couple of small boutique island hotels, and those ones I'd be very excited to do. I guess at one end of the spectrum would be a very beautiful hilltop villa in Bukit Gasing, which is that was a large renovation. So the original house was built in 1980 something, and then I stripped it back to the skeleton, and that's about a 15,000 square foot hilltop. That's really lovely. It's got an elevated 15-meter swimming pool looking out over Bukit Gasing, all jungle all around it, and that was an interesting challenge because it's a 4-generation family household. And what is happening is with the way that house had evolved is that the family were living in separate zones, so they weren't interacting. So again, because of where I come from in my mindset and philosophically, what is important is to effort, and the owners concurred with this, was to create an opportunity for the family to interact, but you also have to create private space so that the grandmother, the mother, the daughter-in-law still have their own independence and privacy, but we can casually interact. So there's a big central family space that even if you aren't going to be there for that next few hours, you pass through, so that you still have a contact, a passive contact as well as an active when they meet and eat together. So that space I really love. I think it's one of my favourite projects ever. It is spectacularly large. One of the best locations in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, I think, and it was technically a very challenging project, so I really enjoyed it. I recently finished a few very, very nice link houses, which is kind of bread and butter for me because I do so many of them. I just finished a very beautiful one in Tementon, and they own 2 link houses, one back to back with each other. So because of that, they were able to design the new one in a very indulgent way. You could take a lot of pressure off the space, and that meant that you could be very indulgent in how the space is created, and as a result, it's not overloaded with storage, but there's still a lot of storage, but the spaces for a link house, the spaces are magnificent. They really are. When you walk into it, you just go, wow, this just feels so grand, because the spaces are very relaxed. In terms of the amount of pressure on the space, it's very relaxed. So those ones I really like. And when you can do that, that's fantastic, because you can take what looks like a tiny house on the outside, and when you walk into them, they look spectacular.
for all homeowners to ask for your services?
Not so much. I tend to do it for my projects. But I'm working, lately I've started working a lot with a furniture company called Rabbit. And I got to know the owner, Judy, quite well. And I might do some design for them, because she's got quite significant manufacturing capacity, and they're a very ambitious business. But because I found them for somebody in my position where I need to find a furnishing solution for a project that's high quality, cost effective, and I can take a lot of time pressure off by engaging their capabilities to support me, then actually they're really good. I see a lot of partnership opportunities with them, but also I see an opportunity for me to, instead of just doing one-offs, design something that they can then take over the manufacturing and then turn it into a catalogue item from their point of view. But to do a lot of retail, I'm not equipped for that. I tend to do one-offs or clusters that are, because I need it for my project.
So is there a specific product that you're looking for you to design?
I think what people sometimes do is they'll see something, they go through my portfolio, or they go through it online, they say, well, I really like that, whatever that is. It might be something I did with railway sleepers or a concrete table, and say, can you do something like that? And I say, okay, I'll design for you, and then I custom design on that style for their space. So that's quite common.
What about Rabbit? Is it a local?
Yeah, local. They're quite new, but they're growing very fast. And after I tried them on a couple of projects, and then I got to know the owner, I just thought, okay, I can see how these guys can. For somebody like me, as a relatively small business, they can take a lot of pressure off me if we can collaborate effectively.
Are they actually looking for a specific piece from you?
Not particularly, but they're very open, because they want to be distinctive in the marketplace too. And my stuff is distinctive, so they want to be mainstream as well as having within the portfolio distinctive or standout pieces, as well as designing their own. I'm happy to take stuff that I design and see it appear in their catalog. Actually, I haven't talked so much to them about that. They might be hearing this for the first time. I don't know.
That's awesome. Do you have any advice for upcoming designers?
You mean young designers, or? Okay. So you got to travel. You got to get out in the world and see stuff. If you're designing spec, in other words, designing from your own creativity, you really have to be very exposed. Designing spec is not easy as when you're starting out, because you haven't established yourself and you don't have the relationships yet, so you have to risk, and if you're prepared to take that risk, that's fine. If you're designing for owners, you have to be very open-eared, really understand what you're trying to say to you, what you're trying to communicate. Don't put your own words into their mouth, so don't force your design out through them. You have to be humble and attentive and open-eared and open-minded to what they're trying to achieve for themselves. But the main thing is exposure. You need to see what other people are doing and have done, and the history of design is important. You have to look back in time and look way back, go back several hundred, 1,000 years. And I still refer, particularly with my architectural design, I draw on the experience and the talent and the creativity of traditional Moroccan design or Turkish design, because of how they, in very hot climates, how they created airflow and disturbance and used water and rails and so on. So you draw from that experience, because some things they are still better, or at least how they approached the design challenge. It was very highly evolved, and so if you're for some design challenges, their high evolution in terms of how they approach it is more relevant than some of the modern stuff.
So is there, in terms of Malaysian design, are there anything that needs to be improved?
I think the market is gradually getting a little bit more open-minded with what it will accept. So when I look at, if I look regionally at where Malaysia sits in terms of its progress in design, I would say it's not a leader, and that's probably driven by the clients. So I look at some of the innovation in countries like, say, Thailand, or on a different end of the spectrum, Japan. I think at the design end, boutique design end, they are much more progressive, but in very different directions. I think Malaysia in the last 5 years has come an awful long way, which is great. But that's not so much a limitation of the designers, it's more a limitation of the customers. So as customers become a little bit more daring, and then designers become a little bit more capable or more expand their skills to meet that, I think you just have to get out there and do it. So the hard part is finding a customer to pay you to do it. I mean, particularly for young ones. For me, it's less of an issue. I'm a small business and I'm very boutique, and I've kind of established already. But for young ones, yeah, it's very challenging. You have to find a client that will encourage and support you going in a slightly more daring direction. You just have to be patient, and maybe not try to overdo it each time. Just bring in feature by feature until you then have a portfolio of interesting aspects. Don't be like the customer who tries to overload your project with too many clever ideas. Be restrained, try and get at least one interesting feature idea into each project so that you can meet the customer need, but also start building your own portfolio.
Thank you so much for your time.